Hello, Voice Global community. I'm so very happy to welcome you today in my home office. My name is Maaike Coppens, and I'm an independent voice UX and strategy consultant and co-founder of Promptful. Today, I'll be talking to you about putting the U in voice UX, a topic I care very greatly about. So let's dig right in. So when we're talking about putting the U in voice UX, what does that really mean? Listen to this wall. Listen, 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 listen. As users, we're constantly assaulted by noise the entire day. And if anything, if the current pandemic, we've become very selective about the noise that we let into our homes and our lives, and very focused on what we really need. And it has also left all of us craving for more connection, for more meaningful experiences. And so now more than ever, brands and voice creators need to think about that and need to make sure that they're designing voice experiences that meet a user's need. And that is not just about the message they want to shout out at them. Because when you only focus on the message you want users to hear, rather than to what they are willing to listen to, you're really only talking about yourself. Me, 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 me. And let's be honest, no one really likes an egocentric person. It really should be all about having a conversation with your user. And really what a conversation is a common dialogue. It's meeting each other in the middle. It's having a conversation where both parties are willing to move forward in common understanding. This requires a connection. It requires trust. And what we see today is that there's still a gap to be bridged when it comes to trust. Users are still experimenting into how far they can trust interactions with voice user interfaces. Whereas brands, companies, and voice creators really would like to see users engage in a long-term relationship, preferring voice over any other interface. So if we want a meaningful conversation to happen, we really need to think about how we can align those two needs, the user's needs and the business needs. That's our job as voice UX designers. When I go into companies, a lot of the time they ask me about how can we create a wow experience. It's not about creating a wow experience, because a wow experience is an experience where the user is amazed at how wonderful a job you've done, is amazed one time and then moves on with his life. A wow experience is not the right thing to aim for. What you need to be aiming for is a woohoo experience. In the woohoo experience, a user is not the observer, but the hero of the conversation. In a woohoo experience, the user's need has been met, his problem has been solved, he has had a useful experience where the user is really front and center. So how can we do that? By using user-driven voice design. And user-driven voice design has really 4 key elements to it, which is empathy, emotion, connection, and relatability. So when I just said empathy, probably half of you will think, oh my God, I ended up in an episode of the Care Bears. Well, let me just be upfront about this. Empathy is indispensable when it comes to voice user interface design. First of all, because voice interactions are what we have had as closest to the natural way that we interact, and also as closest as possible to our emotional realm. Because when you think about voice is all about words, about sound, about how we experience those words and sounds. So it's only natural that we anchor that experience, that we anchor that design in our understanding of our users, in empathy. So what is empathy actually? The dictionary says it is the ability to share someone else's feelings or experience by imagining what it would be like to be in their shoes. As voice UX designers, we need to take that even further. It's not about imagining being in their shoes. It's about knowing and deeply understanding what it is like in their situation. It's profoundly sharing those experiences and feelings. And how can we do that? And how can we then leverage that? We can do that in 4 steps. Listening, by living it, by learning from it, and then by leveraging it into our project. When you design in a vacuum, the only thing you're doing is really solving personal problems with a personal solution infused by your personal bias. Again, it's all about me, and not about you, the user. There was this one project for a global travel company when we were thinking about how are we going to help people book their next travel experience through voice. And with the entire team, we had gone through the ideation phase, and we had come up with what we thought was a magnificent idea, is that we would share travel experience stories, which would then inspire users to book said travel experience in that country. And so we said, okay, but moving forward, the team decided to infuse their practice with empathy. And so we immersed ourselves in travel agencies for a couple of days, really digging deep into the experience of how users book, ask, search for their next travel experience. And to our amazement, inspiring stories were not at all part of how people search for travel experiences. It was all about price and destination. Inspiring stories came later when those 2 criteria, price and destinations, were already settled for. And that was very eye-opening. And had we not decided to actively listen to how people actually ask for travel experiences, ask for advice on travel, then we would have come up with a very void use case. So really, active listening should be the very first thing you do to gather insights into micro moments where voice makes sense for the user, and to also gather linguistic knowledge about how people express themselves in a given situation. What words do they use? What is their intonation? So it's not only about listening to what is happening or to what is being said, but it's also listening to how it is being said. Once you get that first set of knowledge where you rationally understand through user interviews or through immersion or through other techniques like focus groups or speech shadowing, where you actually focus a lot on what people are saying and how they're saying it, that's not enough. It's not only about understanding the experience, it's also about living it, about deeply understanding it, more deeply than just rationally, but also emotionally. Because when users go through an experience, that leaves an emotion with them. It can be positive, it can be neutral, it can be negative, but it has an emotional impact. And so to really understand how to design a conversation, how to design your voice user interface, you also need to live the situation the user is in to further identify if those micro moments are actually moments where voice makes sense and are actually adapted for voice. So over the years, especially the last couple of years, I've done a lot of voice acts design sprints where role play has a key role. A lot of role play is being done to walk a mile in the shoes of the users. And this one use case where we were talking about recycling was really eye-opening when it came to the role play, to living the user's situation. When we were going through the ideation phase, one of the participants said, oh, well, this is going to be so easy. You just plug an API, a database with all the products that there are, and then you match that to the containers that needs to go in, and that's that. And then we went into living the experience, and we had an actual bag of waste sitting there, a bin full of waste, and each participant picked an item. And so the person that said, oh, well, we'll just plug a database, had a bottle of orange juice. And role-playing the fact that he needed to put it in the right container made him realize that one bottle of orange juice had the plastic bottle for one, but also had the cap on the top, and then the paper around it, which he was not sure if that went into the same bin. And then he had a second item, which was another bottle of orange juice, but from another brand, which was in another kind of fabric. So he's totally lost. So it was really eye-opening to see that putting the right waste in the right container can actually be a challenging thing for the user and confusing. In that same use case, we were also thinking about people putting things in the larger containers that the city provides with. And one of the role players was blindfolded, and the voice interaction was about, okay, well, now you have to put that in the yellow container. And by role playing that situation, the person that was playing the user understood, oh my God, like I'm blindfolded. I don't know which one is the yellow container. I have no clue. So it is clear that understanding rationally is not enough. You also have to live the situation. Why? Because spoken word is very different from written word. And all humans have their own vocabulary, their own way of expressing themselves on a certain subject. And those are things that you only really also become conscious of when you are living the situation, when you are expressing yourself in that situation, and when you are also observing others expressing themselves in that given situation. It's also about realizing what the consequences are of physical, emotional, psychological differences and variety amongst people. So now that you've listened and understood rationally what was going on with users when it came to your moment of voice, and when you've also lived that situation, you also have to learn from it. It's not enough to just gather the insights. You need to classify them so that it gives you a picture of who your user is, not as an avatar persona, a fictional character, but as a human being that feels things, does, and especially says things. And so all of these techniques should allow you to put together an MIB. So an MIB is not a famous movie with Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith, but it's a minimal insight base. It's all of the information that you gathered put into a meaningful insight base that will help you keep the user front and center throughout your voice UX process. It contains a mix of the insights and the information that you already had before from other channels, other projects, and the voice-specific information that you gathered, like empathy maps, user expressions, mapping of language, user journeys, including voice-friendly moments, and so on and so forth. It's really your stepping stone into making that common conversation happen. And once you have that, once you have classified all those insights, you can move on and leverage it to have that common conversation. So how do you leverage it? How do you go from noise, which is about the me as a brand, I have ideas, messages, and brand guidelines, and the empathy you just showed, which is the you, who has challenges, worries, needs, questions, impressions about the brand, and emotions, to a common conversation, to that us, to that common ground. While you have to identify the use case that helps the users thrive, a woohoo experience where the user is the hero. You have to find tailored content that answers the user's question. And you have to find the tone of voice, and we'll go into personality and tonality later, that takes into account emotional impact on the user. This is the way you create that connection. So let's talk a bit about emotions. And you'll say, there she goes again with her lovey-dovey stuff. Bear with me, because as I said, emotion is what makes us all tick. Even the most rational people among us actually make a lot of emotion-based decisions. So let me ask you, what did you have for dinner last Thursday? I'll leave you a few seconds, because chances are, if you're like me, that you hardly remember what you had for dinner last Thursday. Now, remember the happiest day of your life. If I'm not mistaken, that was actually a lot easier, because moments that had an emotional impact on us, be it positive or negative, and they get associated into our long-term memory with sounds, they get associated with smells, they get associated with situation, and they get associated sometimes with brands. So lately when designing a very practical customer service voice experience, the brand I was working with decided to use a jingle they had years ago as an earcon. And when we were doing usability testing and one of the users heard the sound, they told us, wow, that brings back memories that I don't remember. And that was really funny to us, because, okay, how? He said, well, this sound is very familiar and it makes me think about my childhood. I don't have a specific memory, but it's an overall feeling of nostalgia and happiness and childhood. Everything in our designs triggers an emotional response, and we should be really, really conscious of that throughout our voice UX process. So I know there's a lot of excitement going on about sentiment analysis, about getting the system to respond to the user's emotion, but the journey starts before. The journey starts at the very first design, about how are we, what we are saying, how is that going to impact the user emotionally? And we need to be very conscious about that, because sometimes that might seem like an afterthought rather than writing nice copy and making it wow. But it is really important, especially when it comes to diversity. And I learned this the hard way. We were designing a voice experience for the healthcare environment. One of the users told us that he was very offended by the fact that the system had told him, I didn't hear that. And we asked him why, and he said, well, I have hearing problems. And a computer that tells me that he didn't hear something is really offensive to me, because it reminds me of the fact that I don't hear things as good as I used to. And that was really eye-opening. So we need to be mindful when we use words, because words matter. Words have impact on a very emotional and personal level. Voice is the interface that allows more than any before to create a link, a connection. Why? Because voice user interfaces combine two very important elements for that, which is word and sound. Words are the building blocks of stories, and stories is how humans have thrived over the years. And voice user interface use sound, and as we saw before, sound can have a very deep impact emotionally and can leave lasting memories throughout the years. The human brain really hones in on relatable words, on music, on stories, on sounds, on a very deep instinctive level. There's actually a study done by Stanford researchers, and they examined a set of 1,000 speed dating situations. And they found that more than anything else, more than looks, more than the environment it was given in, what really made that participants in those speed dates clicked with each other, had a link, had a connection, was the words that the different participants used. The words and the way those words were delivered. And they found that appreciative language, sympathetic language, empathy, demonstrating the fact that you understood what the other person was saying, were one of the key elements into the decision making of, I feel like I had a connection with that other person in this conversation. So it's not only about what you say, it's about how you say it, the emotion you convey. Well, there it is again, emotion. And lastly, I'd like to talk about relatability. Relatability, according to the dictionary, is the quality of being easy to understand or feel sympathy for. It's actually a mix of understanding, ease of use, and empathy, if you really think about it. And so it's obviously important for voice user interfaces, as your audience must be able to sympathize with your system's personality in order to create that famous connection. The interaction also have to be easy to understand for your audience, so they can easily become part of that common dialogue you're writing together. So how do we go about having that relatability, and what are some of the challenges? We are all part of a multicultural, multi-capable tribe. As individuals, we can or cannot relate to certain experiences based on what words are being used, based on what images that evokes, based on what that does with us emotionally. So when designing voice user interfaces, it becomes essential to design experience individuals can relate to and build a connection with, no matter what their cultural background is, or their physical, emotional, or psychological abilities. And we need to be aware of that. Okay, so let me make a bit of a controversial statement here. Only white males with a red nose are funny. Okay, so we all know this to be false, right? Well, I clearly hope so. So then, why do we keep using system personas as avatars in voice user interfaces? I agree that personality is very important for relatability, for the common dialogue you are setting out to have with your users, but it's about personality, it should be, and not about personification. It's about tonality, it's about vocabulary, it's about prosody, it's about sound, it's about personability, but it's not about an avatar. Users are diverse, not only from an ethnographic perspective, but also from a speech style or a linguistic perspective. And as individuals, we are part of language groups. We all have our own personal vocabulary, our own personal way of expressing ourselves. We're also part of a family group where some of our family uses words that other families don't. We're also part of our city's language. In France, there are actually a feud between different cities about how you should call a chocolate bun. Some say it's called chocolatine, and others call it pain au chocolat. It's the same thing, only we use different words. So, from every kind of perspective, diversity is the name of the game. But doesn't designing for many really mean designing for none, you might ask me? And I'd say not really. On the contrary, it's about being personally inclusive. By personalizing the experience and tailoring the experience for each in function of their specific environment, we make sure to take into account their specific needs, and we move from voice for some that relate to your avatar to voice for each. So if there's anything you take out of this presentation, I would like it to be this: be a voice, not a noise. I wish you a very nice day, and I hope you stay in touch. And if you have any questions, I'm always very happy to answer those. Goodbye.